The dust-caked woman appeared like a mirage on Main Street, carrying nothing but shadows in her eyes. The townsfolk whispered and turned away, marking her as a drifter best left alone. She found refuge in forgotten corners, the livery's hayloft, the saloon's back room, surviving on scraps of kindness too small to be called charity. Then Wade McAllister rode into town. The wealthiest rancher for 100 miles took one look at her and did something that left even the gossips speechless. Without asking her story or even her name, he claimed her as his wife. What dark secret could make a woman erase her entire identity and flee into the untamed West? And what kind of man would marry a stranger without asking a single question? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She'd learned to move like a ghost through the edges of town, keeping to the shadows of buildings and slipping through alleyways when the morning sun cast long fingers across Main Street. Her weathered carpet bag, its handle worn smooth from desperate clasping, contained everything she owned in this world: 3 dresses carefully mended, a tin of soap that smelled of lavender, and a hidden compartment sewn into the lining that held secrets she dared not touch. The livery stable had become her sanctuary in the week since she'd stepped off the westbound train. Old Jim, the stable master, pretended not to notice her sleeping in the hayloft, though she'd caught him leaving a wool blanket near her chosen corner. She repaid his kindness by rising before dawn to help with the morning feed, her hands remembering the comfort of honest work. But work, real work that might earn her a place in this dust-blown town, proved elusive. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house had sized her up with sharp eyes and shaken her head. "No references, no name to speak of. I run a respectable establishment." The general store, the dress shop, even the laundry, all turned her away with variations of the same mistrust. She understood their wariness. A woman alone carried shadows, and she carried more than most. Still, she couldn't help but admire how the townsfolk of Copper Creek wrapped themselves in the certainty of their positions. The banker's wife in her silk dress, the schoolteacher with her stack of books, the sheriff's daughter leading her horse to water. They wore their names and histories like armor, while she wrapped herself in silence. The saloon offered her an unexpected mercy. Martha, the aging barmaid with eyes that had seen too much of life's harder edges, let her wash dishes in exchange for table scraps and a place to sleep when the nights grew too cold for the stable. "Don't need to know your story, girl," Martha had said, her voice rough with tobacco. "Just need clean glasses and quick hands." It was there, elbow deep in soapy water, that she first felt his gaze. Wade McAllister cut an imposing figure even. In the dim light of the saloon, his shoulders broad beneath a well-worn duster, his eyes the deep brown of rich earth after rain. He nursed his whiskey slowly, watching her without pretense or shame, but something in his steady regard spoke more of evaluation than attraction. The memory rose unbidden. Another man's evaluating stare, another time when she'd been weighed and measured and found suitable for purchase. Her hands trembled, sending ripples through the dishwater. But no, this was different. McAllister's gaze held none of that possessive heat, none of that barely contained violence. He watched her like a man might study a wild thing that had wandered into his path, with curiosity, with patience, with something that might have been recognition of a kindred, wounded spirit. When he finally spoke to Martha, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being heard. "She's new," not a question, but Martha answered anyway. "Came in on the westbound. Keeps to herself. Works hard. That's all any of us need to know." McAllister nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "She's running from something. Aren't we all?" Martha's laugh held no humor. "Leave her be, Wade. She's got enough troubles without adding a man to the mix." But his eyes found her. Again and again over the next 3 days, watching as she moved through the saloon like a shadow-given form, noting how she kept her back to walls and her gaze on exits. She felt the weight of his attention even when he wasn't there, as if he'd marked her somehow, claimed a piece of her story without asking its price. On the fourth day, she woke to the sound of hoofbeats and masculine voices in the stable yard. Through a gap in the hayloft boards, she watched McAllister swing down from his horse, his movements easy, with the grace of a lifetime spent in the saddle. He spoke quietly with old Jim, who gestured toward the hayloft with a jerky nod. Her heart began to pound. She gathered her carpetbag with trembling fingers, ready to flee, to disappear into the vast emptiness of the territory. But something in McAllister's stance, in the careful way he positioned himself where she could see him clearly, made her pause. "I know you're up there," he called softly, "and I know you're running. I'm not asking where from or why, but I'm offering you a choice. Keep running or take a chance on something different." She descended the hayloft ladder with careful steps, her carpetbag clutched close. McAllister stood waiting, his hat held respectfully in his hands, and for the first time she allowed herself to truly look at him. The lines around his eyes spoke of long days under harsh sun, but there was kindness in those creases, a gentleness that belied his imposing frame. "I have a proposition," he said, his voice pitched low for her ears alone. "One that might solve both our problems." She found her voice rusty from disuse. "What problems would those be, Mr. McAllister?" "You need a safe place. I need a wife." He stated it simply, like discussing the weather. "The ranch is too big for one person to manage. The hands need a woman's touch in the kitchen, and I—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "I need someone who understands the value of silence." The implications of his words hung in the dusty stable air. A marriage of convenience, but one that offered more than mere shelter. He was giving her a new identity, a shield against whatever pursued her without demanding she expose her old wounds. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Because sometimes the kindest question is the one left unasked. He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not looking for love, Mom. Just partnership and maybe, in time, trust." Old Jim shuffled nearby, pretending fascination with a curry comb, while clearly straining to hear every word. She almost smiled at his transparent concern for her welfare. These people who had shown her small kindnesses without demanding her story had become the closest thing to friends she'd known in months of running. "If I agree," she said carefully, "what would you expect? Help with the ranch, respect for my property and privacy, as I'll respect yours, and your word that whatever you're running from won't bring harm to my people." His brown eyes hardened slightly. "I protect what's mine." The possessive word should have frightened her. Instead, it offered a strange comfort. Protection, not possession. A subtle but crucial difference. "I accept," she whispered. McAllister nodded once, sharply, then turned to old Jim. "Witness what I'm about to do." He strode out of the stable, his boot heels striking the wooden floor with purpose. She followed, drawn in his wake like a leaf caught in a gentle but inexorable current. The saloon was already crowded, despite the early hour. Martha worked the bar, her practiced hands pouring whiskey without measuring. All conversation ceased when McAllister entered, the nameless woman 3 steps behind him. "Friends," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner. "I'm taking a wife." The silence deepened. Martha's hand froze mid-pour. In the shocked stillness, someone's coffee cup clattered against a saucer. "This lady," he continued, gesturing to her with subtle grace, "has agreed to marry me. We'll sign the papers today. Any objections can be brought to me privately at the ranch." The steel in his tone suggested such objections would be unwise. Sheriff Patterson pushed away from the bar, his weathered face creased with concern. "Wade, you can't be serious. We don't know anything about her. No name, no history." "She'll take my name," McAllister cut in smoothly. "And history is just stories we tell about the past. I'm more interested in the future." The sheriff opened his mouth to argue further, but Martha's sharp voice interrupted. "Well, it's about time." The barmaid's face split in a broad grin. Girl needs a home. Wade needs a wife. Seems simple enough to me. She came around the bar, surprisingly spry for her age, and pressed a wrapped package into the woman's hands. Wedding gift. Every bride needs something new. The package held a simple blue calico dress, fresh from the general store. The woman's fingers trembled as they traced the clean, bright fabric. A dress bought new, not scrounged or mended. A dress meant for beginnings. Within the hour, they stood before Judge Harrison in his cluttered office. The marriage certificate lay between them, crisp and official, with a blank space where her name should be. She held the pen with uncertain fingers. "Just sign, Mrs. McAllister," Wade murmured. "The past can stay where it is." She signed with careful strokes, watching the wet ink glisten. In that moment, she became someone new. Not reborn exactly, but transformed, like a wild creature finding sanctuary in a gentle hand. They left town in Wade's wagon, her carpet bag tucked safely behind the seat. The whispers and stares of the townsfolk followed them, but she sat straight-backed beside her new husband, watching Copper Creek recede into the golden afternoon. Ahead lay the ranch, and whatever future they might forge from this strange bargain of silence and trust. The McAllister Ranch spread across the landscape like a kingdom, bounded by distant mountains and cut through by a creek that flashed silver in the late afternoon sun. As their wagon crested the final hill, she caught her breath at the sight of the main house, a two-story structure of solid timber and native stone that spoke of permanence and pride. "Built it myself," Wade said quietly, noting her reaction. "Took 3 years. Every nail, every board had its purpose." He handled the reins with casual expertise as they approached the house. Like everything else here, 4 ranch hands emerged from the barn at the sound of the wagon. They stood in a loose half-circle, curious but maintaining a respectful distance. Wade helped her down, his touch light on her elbow. "Mrs. McAllister," he announced, and she felt the weight of her new name settle around her shoulders. "Meet the crew. Tom Burke, my foreman, brothers Jake and Matt Wilson, and young Sam Tucker, best horse trainer this side of the Rockies." Each man touched his hat brim, murmuring greetings. Tom Burke, grey-haired and weather-beaten, stepped forward. "Welcome home, ma'am. We've prepared the house best we could." Inside, the house surprised her. She'd expected bachelor simplicity, but instead found evidence of careful planning. The kitchen gleamed with new copper pots and fresh scrubbed surfaces. The parlor held comfortable furniture arranged for conversation. Upstairs, Wade showed her to a room that made her pause in the doorway. "Your room," he said. "Mine's across the hall. I meant what I said about respect." He hesitated, then added, "My late wife's things are in the trunk by the window. Sarah was about your size. Use what you need." The trunk's brass fittings shone, a dully in the fading light. She touched its surface tentatively. What happened to her? "Fever. 4 years ago." His voice held old pain, well worn but not forgotten. "She taught me that some silences are necessary for healing." He left her then, his bootsteps fading down the hall. She stood in her new room, surrounded by the possessions of a dead woman and the whispered promises of a fresh start. Later, unable to sleep, she found herself drawn to Wade's study. A lamp still burned inside. She meant to retreat quietly, but he called out, "Come in, if you like." He sat at a massive oak desk, a leather-bound ledger open before him. Row after row of precise handwriting detailed the ranch's operation: cattle counts, feed costs, wages paid, every transaction recorded with meticulous care. "I believe in keeping clear accounts," he said, turning a page. "Helps me sleep at night, knowing where everything stands." He glanced up at her. "The ranch runs on trust, Mrs. McAllister, trust and truth, as far as it can be told." She moved closer, drawn by the quiet authority in his voice. The ledger told a story of its own, of careful building, of plans laid and executed, of a man who valued order but left room for possibility. In the margin of one page, a small note caught her eye. "Sarah's roses need replanting. The garden's gone wild. Wade said, following her gaze. I couldn't bring myself to tear it out, but I'm no hand with flowers. She thought of the tiny pot of violets she'd once tended on a windowsill before everything changed. I could help with that. If you like. He closed the ledger gently. Tomorrow, I'll show you the rest of the ranch. For now, try to rest. You're safe here. Safe. The word echoed in her mind as she returned to her room. Through the window, she could see the distant line of mountains, solid and unchanging against the star-strewn sky. Somewhere in the barn, a horse nickered softly. The tickage. Sound of hoofbeats approached, one of the hands making his evening rounds. She unpacked her carpet bag, hanging her few dresses beside the finer ones from Sarah's trunk. The hidden compartment remained unopened. Some secrets could wait. In the morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of men's voices drifting. Up from below, she dressed in one of Sarah's working dresses, the fabric soft with age, but still sturdy. In the mirror, a stranger looked back at her. Not quite the frightened fugitive, not yet the confident rancher's wife. Someone in between. Someone becoming. The kitchen proved to be her first challenge. The hands had been cooking for themselves, living on beans and biscuits. She found flour, lard, dried fruit, and determination. By the time Wade came in from the morning check of the herds, fresh bread cooled on the sideboard. "Smells like home," he said, and something in his voice made her turn. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Approval, certainly, but something more. Recognition, perhaps, of the woman she might become, if given room to grow. The mare stood trembling in the corner of the corral, her dark eyes rolling white at the edges. Sam Tucker leaned against the fence, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. "Been trying for days, Mrs. McAllister. She won't let anyone near her." She studied the horse from a distance. The mare's coat, beneath the dust and sweat, held the rich color of aged copper. A half-healed wound marked her flank, telling tales of barbed wire or worse. "May I try?" The words surprised her as much as Sam. He straightened, uncertain. "Mr. McAllister said you knew horses, but this one's dangerous. Won't even take feed from my hand." She was already slipping through the fence rails. "Sometimes. The wounded ones just need quiet. Like me," she didn't add. The mare watched her approach, ears flicking forward then back. She kept her movement slow, deliberate, remembering lessons learned long ago in another life. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "No one's going to hurt you here." She stopped several feet away, simply standing, letting the mare grow accustomed to her presence. After a while, she began to hum, an old lullaby her mother had sung, its words long forgotten, but its melody still soothing. "Well, I'll be damned," Sam whispered from the fence. The mare had taken 2 steps forward, neck stretched out, nostrils flaring to catch her scent. She kept humming, held out one empty hand, palm up. Another step. She could feel the horse's warm breath now. "That's it," she whispered. "You're safe now. Safe like me." A soft nose touched her palm. Wade found them there an hour later, the mare's head lowered, while she gentled tangles from its mane with careful fingers. He said nothing, but she felt the weight of his approval. In his silence. That evening, she discovered a worn manual on horse training among the study's books, its margins filled with notes in a feminine hand. Sarah's knowledge, preserved in fading ink. She stayed up late reading, absorbing techniques and wisdom from the woman who had come before. The days fell into rhythm. Mornings in the kitchen, preparing hearty meals for hungry men. Afternoons, split between Sarah's wild garden and the wounded mare, coaxing both back to life. She learned the ranch's patterns, which pastures needed rotating when the creek ran high, which hands preferred coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Wade watched her growing confidence with quiet satisfaction. He never pressed for her. Story never demanded more than she could give, but sometimes, over evening meals or chance meetings in the barn, he'd share pieces of his own past. The death of his parents that left him the ranch at 20, the years of building, learning, making mistakes. Sarah's arrival as a schoolteacher, their courtship, their brief happiness before illness stole her away. "She would have liked you," he said one evening, as they watched the mare take her first ride under saddle. Sarah believed in second chances. The mare danced sideways, still nervous but trusting now, like her rider, learning to balance between past fears and future possibilities. She had named the horse Dawn, for the promise of new beginnings. Young Sam had become her eager student, watching in fascination as she worked with the mare. "Never seen anything like it, Mr. McAllister," she overheard him say. "She just understands them, like she can read their minds." "Not their minds," Wade replied. "Their hearts. There's a difference." She pretended not to hear, but his words warmed something inside her. Here, among people who accepted her silence without resentment, she was finding pieces of herself she'd thought lost forever. The girl who had loved horses before fear taught her to run. The woman who could create beauty from chaos, whether in garden beds or fresh-baked bread, or the trust of a wounded creature. But at night, alone in her room, she still startled at unexpected sounds, still kept her carpet bag packed, ready for flight. Still woke sometimes, with her heart pounding from dreams of pursuing hoofbeats and men's angry voices. The past wasn't finished with her yet. She could feel it, like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon. But for now, she had this: dawn. Light on prairie grass, the sweet scent of Sarah's roses, and the steady presence of a man who asked nothing but offered everything. The supply wagon needed restocking, and Wade couldn't spare any of the hands. "I'll go," she offered over breakfast, surprising herself with her boldness. His eyes searched her face, measuring her readiness. "Take Dawn," he said finally. "She needs the experience, and you might need the speed." The morning air held autumn's first bite as she rode into Copper Creek, the supply list tucked safely in her pocket. Dawn's hooves rang confident against the packed earth, her trust now complete. If only people were as easily won over as horses. The whispers started the moment she tied Dawn outside the general store. Women gathered in twos and threes, their conversations dying as she passed. Inside, Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house stood at the counter, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Sarah's reformed dress and carefully pinned hair. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. McAllister," she said, making the name sound like an accusation. "Settled in nicely, have you?" She nodded politely, handing her list to Mr. Peterson, the shopkeeper. He began gathering supplies with efficient movements, but his usual friendly chatter was conspicuously absent. "Heard you've got quite a way with horses," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Interesting skill for a lady of uncertain background." Before she could respond, the door opened with a jangle of bells. Sheriff Patterson stepped in, his badge catching the morning light. "Mrs. McAllister, mind if we have a word?" Her heart jumped, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course, Sheriff." He led her to his office across the street, closing the door with deliberate care. On his desk lay an envelope, unmarked except for a single word: warning. "This came in yesterday's." "Mail," he said, sliding it toward her. "Thought you and Wade should see it." The paper inside held 3 lines of careful script. "McAllister harbors a fugitive. Her kind brings nothing but trouble. Remember Sarah." The implied threat in those last 2 words made her hand shake. "Who sent this?" "Anonymous." Patterson sighed. "Look, I've known Wade McAllister for 15 years. He's a good man, maybe the best in the territory, but he's also stubborn as a mule and blind as a bat when it comes to strays." He leaned forward. "Whatever you're running from, it's going to catch up eventually. Better to face it now, before anyone gets hurt." "Like Sarah did." The words came out sharper than intended. The sheriff's face softened slightly. "Sarah's death nearly broke him. Fever's a terrible way to go, but at least it was natural. What's coming for you? I'm guessing it ain't natural at all." She stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor. "You're right about one thing, Sheriff. Wade. McAllister is a good man, good enough to offer sanctuary without demanding explanations. I won't betray that trust by running, and I won't let anyone use his late wife's memory as a weapon against him." Patterson studied her for a long moment. "You care about him." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I care about all of them. The ranch, the hands, the life they've built. I won't be the one to destroy it." "Then pray whatever's chasing you never finds Copper Creek." He held up the warning letter. "Because someone already knows you're here." She left his office with her spine straight and her mind racing. Dawn nickered a greeting, drawing a small smile despite her fears. The mare's copper coat gleamed in the sunlight, a testament to weeks of good care and better food. Wade was waiting in the yard when she returned, taking in her expression with one glance. "Trouble?" She handed him the letter wordlessly. His face darkened as he read, jaw tightening at the mention of Sarah. "Cowards," he spat. "Using her name like that." He crumpled the paper in one large fist. "Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." "Wade," she hesitated, the weight of unspoken truths heavy between them. "You should know." "No," he cut her off gently. "When you're ready to tell me, you will. Until then, you're Mrs. McAllister of the Triple M Ranch, and that's all anyone needs to know." She touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "I won't let them hurt you, any of you." His hand covered hers, warm and calloused. "That's not your burden to carry alone. Not anymore." He gestured toward the house, where lantern light spilled welcoming from the kitchen windows. "Come on! The boys are waiting for supper, and Tom says you make the best biscuits this side of the Mississippi." She let him lead her inside. But the warning letter's words echoed in her mind. The past was catching up, casting shadows over this fragile peace she'd found. And somewhere, someone in Copper Creek was watching, waiting for those shadows to deepen into storm. The storm rolled in from the mountains like God's own fury, turning afternoon to twilight in the space of a breath. Wade stood on the porch reading. Weather signs in the wind. "It's going to be bad," he said, voice tight with concern. "The north pasture herd needs moving. They're too close to the creek." Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that shook the house to its foundations. In the barn, horses whinnied in fear. "I'll help," she said, already moving toward the stable. He caught her arm. "It's too dangerous. I can ride Dawn in any weather." Their eyes met, held. "You need every hand you can get." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn woman." But he nodded, reaching for his oilskin coat. The hands were already mounted when they reached the barn, faces grim under their hat brims. Young Sam led out Dawn, who danced nervously at another crack of thunder. "North herd's about 50 head, Tom shouted over the rising wind. "Creeks, rising fast. We've got maybe an hour before it floods." Rain began to fall as they rode out, fat drops that quickly became sheets of water. Dawn moved sure-footed beneath her, responding to the lightest touch. They found the herd bunched tight against the wind, cattle lowing in distress. "Circle wide!" Wade's voice carried despite the storm. "Drive them south toward the high ground." She urged Dawn to the east edge of the herd, rain stinging her face. The mare seemed to understand the urgency, helping to turn the frightened cattle with careful precision. Lightning flashed again, closer now, and she caught glimpses of the riders through the deluge. Tom's grey hair plastered to his neck, the Wilson brothers working in synchronized motion, Sam's young face set with determination. Then she saw it, the creek, already swollen past its banks, brown water churning with debris, and beyond it, something that made her blood run cold. 3 riders, watching from the far bank, their features hidden by rain and distance. A cattle bawled in panic as thunder crashed overhead. The herd started to break, fear overwhelming training. "They're splitting!" Sam yelled. She forced her attention back to the immediate danger. Dawn responded instantly, cutting off a group of steers before they could scatter. The work was instinctive now, muscles remembering skills learned in another life, when her father had still been alive to teach her. Wade appeared beside her, his horse shoulder to shoulder with Dawn. Together they worked the cattle south, away from the rising water and the watching strangers. Rain ran in rivers from his hat brim as he gestured toward a gap in the herd. She nodded, understanding without words. Dawn surged forward, helping to close the break. For precious minutes, there was nothing but the work. The press of cattle, the drum of hooves, the cry of men, and the endless rain. Finally, the herd moved as one towards safety, but the creek had risen further, cutting off their planned route. Wade signaled a change in direction, leading them toward higher ground. Lightning illuminated the scene in stark detail. Cattle, streaming across the sodden grass, riders hunched against the storm's fury, and the three watchers gone from the far bank. Something in her chest loosened slightly. Whoever they were, they'd retreated from the weather's wrath. They fought wind and rain for another hour, driving the herd to the shelter of a tree-lined ridge. By the time the cattle settled, the storm was passing, though rain still fell steadily. "Everyone all right?" Wade called out. A chorus of tired affirmatives answered him. She was soaked to the skin, muscles aching but oddly exhilarated. Dawn seemed to share her mood, prancing a little, despite her fatigue. Back at the ranch, they found Wade's old family Bible on the kitchen table, open to the Psalms. Martha from the saloon had once mentioned his habit of reading scripture during storms, a comfort learned from his mother. The worn pages bore annotations. In different hands, his parents, Sarah, Wade himself, generations seeking solace in ancient words. Wade came up behind her as she studied the faded notes. "You did well out there," he said quietly. "Not many could handle a horse like that in weather like this." She traced a line of text with one finger. "My father taught me, before he died." The admission slipped out easily, surprising her. It was the first piece of her past she'd offered freely. He didn't press for more, just rested a hand on her shoulder. The touch was tentative, careful, but it sent warmth through her rain-chilled body. They stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the storm's retreat and the settling sounds of the house. Later, she would remember this as the moment something shifted between them, trust deepening into something more complex, like the layers of notes in Wade's Bible, each adding their own story to a greater whole. The storm left behind a world washed clean, but damage needed tending. She rode out with Wade to check fences, Dawn picking her way carefully through mud-slicked grass. They worked in comfortable silence, mending breaks where debris had struck. The sun beat down fierce after the rain, and she rolled up her sleeves without thinking. It wasn't until she caught Wade's sudden stillness that she remembered. The scars traced her right forearm like silver rivers, burn marks long healed but never faded. "House fire," she said quietly, answering his unspoken question. She could have rolled her sleeves back down, hidden the evidence of her past. But something in her was tired of hiding. Wade moved closer, eyes on her face rather than the scars. "The one they reported in the Eastern papers? The Madison estate?" Her heart stopped. "How did you—" He pulled a folded newspaper clipping from his shirt pocket. The paper was yellowed, creased from repeated handling. "Found this in town yesterday, after you showed me the warning letter. Thought you should know what's circulating." Her hands trembled as she took it. The headline struck like a physical blow. "Madison Mansion burns. Prominent businessman's wife presumed dead." Below was an artist's rendering of a grand house, consumed by flames, and a smaller sketch of a woman's face. Her face, though younger, more innocent. The name beneath it wasn't hers, not the one she'd been born with, but the one she'd been. "Given in marriage, Mrs. Catherine Madison." "Catherine," Wade said softly, testing the name. "No." Her voice was sharp. "She died in that fire. Had to die or—" She stopped, pressing her fingers to her lips. "Or he would have found you." Wade's tone was neutral, but she heard the contained anger beneath it. "Your husband, Richard Madison." The name tasted like ashes in her mouth. "Yes." Wade waited, patient as always, while she gathered courage to continue. The story spilled out in fragments, like shards of broken glass that had been cutting her from the inside. He was respected, powerful. No one saw what happened behind closed doors. The rage, the drinking, the punishments. Her hand traced the scars unconsciously. These weren't from the fire. He held my arm against the stove when dinner was late. Dawn shifted beneath her, sensing her distress. Wade's face had gone hard as granite, but his voice remained gentle. "How did you escape?" "Our housekeeper, Mary. She helped me plan it. Waited for a night he was away on business. We set the fire ourselves, in the east wing where my rooms were. Made it look like I'd been trapped." A bitter smile touched her lips. Richard had taught me well about staging accidents. The housekeeper? Safe. He never suspected her. She wrote to me once, at a post office in Ohio, said he'd worn black for a month, playing the grieving widower perfectly. Then he started asking questions, looking at train schedules heading west. Wade folded the newspaper carefully, tucked it away. "That's why you never stay in one place long. Why you don't use your real name. Catherine Madison had money, connections. She could have fought back, testified about the abuse, but she was weak, afraid, so I became someone else, someone stronger." She straightened in the saddle. "I won't be weak again. No," Wade said quietly. "You won't." He reached across the space between their horses, took her scarred hand in his. "But you don't have to be strong alone anymore." The touch of his calloused fingers against her scars should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like absolution, like the morning after the fire when she'd watched her old life burn away and felt nothing but relief. "I should leave," she whispered. "He'll never stop looking, and that warning letter proves someone knows who I am. You leaving won't stop him." Wade's grip tightened slightly. "It'll just mean you're alone when he finds you. I won't risk your life, any of your lives. Not your choice to make." His voice held the same quiet authority she'd heard the day he claimed her in the saloon. "You're Mrs. McAllister now, my wife. What threatens you threatens me." "Wade, no." He cut her off gently. "I told you the day we met. I protect what's mine. Not because I own you, because you chose to trust me with your safety. Will you trust me with this too?" She looked at their joined hands, his strong and sun-browned, hers marked by old wounds but steady now. Beyond them, the ranch spread, out like a painting, everything she'd come to love in the past weeks, everything she'd been ready to leave to keep safe. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll trust you." They rode home together as afternoon softened toward evening, the renewed fence line stretching behind them like a promise kept. She felt lighter, as if sharing the weight of her past had finally begun to free her from its chains. But in her heart she knew Richard Madison was still out there, burning with the same rage that had marked her flesh and soul. And someday soon, he would follow that newspaper clipping straight to Copper Creek. The sound of approaching horses broke the morning quiet. Wade looked up from the deed papers spread across his desk, his expression darkening as he recognized the riders through the window. "Clayton Blackwood," he said, the name like gravel in his mouth, "and his boys." She stood at his shoulder, watching 4 men dismount in the yard. The leader carried himself with the arrogant assurance of wealth, his clothes too fine for ranch work. The others lounged near their horses, hands casually near gun belts. "Stay inside," Wade said, rising. "No." She matched his tone. "This is my home now, too." A smile touched his lips despite the tension. Together, they went to meet their unwelcome visitors. "McAllister," Blackwood's voice boomed across the yard, "finally found yourself a woman, I see, and quite a mysterious one at that." The deed papers in Wade's study had told their own story. Years of border disputes between the ranches, Blackwood constantly pushing boundaries, trying to claim water rights that weren't his. "State your business, Clayton," Wade said coldly. Blackwood spread his hands in mock friendship. Can't a neighbor pay his respects to a new bride, especially one with such an interesting past? She felt Wade tense beside her, but kept her own face carefully neutral. Blackwood's eyes reminded her of Richard's, calculating cruel beneath a polished surface. Though I must say, Blackwood continued, it's unlike you to be so incautious, Wade, taking in strays without knowing their history, without knowing who might come looking for them. My wife's history is her own, Wade replied, as is this, and land, which you're trespassing on. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. About that. There seems to be some confusion over the property line near Cottonwood Creek. My deed shows, your deed shows exactly what mine does, Wade cut in. The creek boundary hasn't changed in 30 years. Perhaps we should let the courts decide. Blackwood pulled a folded paper from his coat. I've filed a formal challenge to your water rights. Times are changing, McAllister. Small ranchers, like you, clinging to outdated ideas of honor and tradition, you're a dying breed. And men like you think money can buy anything, including justice. Everything has a price. Blackwood's gaze shifted to her, turned appraising. Everything and everyone. Isn't that right, Mrs. McAllister? Or should I say, that's enough? Wade's voice cracked like a whip. You've delivered your papers, now get off my land. The hands had emerged from the barn, casually positioning themselves around the yard. Tom's rifle gleamed in the morning sun. Blackwood noted their positions with a smirk. Think carefully, Wade. I'm offering a fair price for those water rights. More than fair, considering the complications your new marriage might bring. He touched his hat brim with mocking courtesy. Ma'am, do give my regards to your former husband when he arrives. They watched the riders leave, dust rising behind them like smoke signals. Only when they were gone did Wade's fists unclench. He's working with Richard, she said quietly. Yes. Wade turned to her. He's been trying to buy out smaller ranches. For years. This is just his latest pressure tactic. Using me, using my past. Anger and fear warred in her chest. Wade, if he knows who I am, he knows enough to make threats, not enough to act on them. Yet, Wade's jaw set stubbornly. I've dealt with Blackwood before. He won't win this time either. But she heard the worry beneath his confidence. The deed papers had shown how much the ranch depended on that creek water. Without it, the land would wither, the cattle would suffer. Everything Wade had built could crumble. And now, her presence had given Blackwood a new weapon to use against him. I won't let him destroy what you've built, she said. Not because of me. Wade took her hands, turned her to face him. Catherine. He spoke her old name softly, making it sound like something precious rather than haunted. What I've built means nothing without someone to share it with. Someone who understands what it means to fight for what matters. His thumbs traced the scars on her wrists, not with pity, but with recognition of her strength. She leaned into his touch, letting herself draw comfort from his solid presence. But beyond the ranch's boundaries, storm clouds gathered, Blackwoods. Threats hung in the air like the memory of thunder. And somewhere Richard Madison was drawing closer, following the trail of whispers and warnings that led straight to her door. The Harvest Festival transformed Copper Creek's main street into a riot of color and sound. Bunting draped between buildings, children darted through crowds with painted faces, and the smell of barbecue mixed with Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning apple pies. You don't have to do this, Wade said quietly as they tied their horses. The hands would understand if you stayed home. But she squared her shoulders, smoothing Sarah's blue dress with steady hands. I'm Mrs. McAllister. This is where I belong. The morning went better than expected. Martha's warm welcome drew others to follow suit. She found herself drawn into conversations about preserves and cattle prices, mundane topics that felt like precious gifts after months of isolation. Then she saw the locket. It hung from Jenny Patterson's neck, the sheriff's daughter proudly, showing off her birthday gift. Silver flowers etched on the surface, identical to the one Richard had given her on their wedding day, the one she'd torn from her throat the night of the fire. The world tilted sideways. Sound became distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. She was vaguely aware of Wade's hand at her elbow, of concerned voices asking if she felt faint. Air, she managed. I need air. Wade led her behind the general store, away from prying eyes. She braced herself against the wall, fighting memories of another festival, another life. Richard's fingers fastening the locket around her neck. His whispered words, "Now everyone will know you're mine." That night he had broken 3 of her ribs for dancing too long with his business partner. "Catherine," Wade's voice anchored her to the present. "Look at me. You're safe." She fumbled at her throat, phantom metal choking her. He always found ways to mark me as his property. Jewelry, dresses, the way he introduced me to his friends. "My lovely wife, my perfect Catherine." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I was never perfect enough." Wade's hands covered hers, gentle but firm. "You're not his anymore. You never should have been. Sometimes I wonder if I ever stop being his, if I'll always be running, looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to—" Her voice broke. From her pocket, she drew out the item she'd carried. Since the fire, a broken locket, its silver surface scarred by heat and violence. The last piece of Catherine Madison's life. "I keep it to remind myself," she whispered, "of what I escaped, of why I can never stop running." Wade took the locket, studied it in the harsh sunlight. Then, with deliberate care, he placed it on the ground and brought his boot heel down hard. The metal crumpled beyond repair now. "The past only owns us if we let it," he said, gathering the broken pieces. "This isn't your reminder anymore. We'll melt it down, make something new, something chosen, not imposed." She stared at the destroyed locket, feeling something shift inside her. Wade was right. She'd been carrying chains of her own making, letting old fears dictate her future. "I can't keep running," she said slowly. "Not just because he'll eventually find me, but because I'm tired of letting him steal more years of my life." Wade's hand cupped her cheek, and for the first time she didn't flinch from a man's touch. "Then we stand and fight, together." The festival music drifted around the corner, a familiar waltz. Wade held out his hand. "Dance with me?" She hesitated only a moment before stepping into his arms. They moved together in the dusty back alley, her head coming to rest naturally against his chest. His heartbeat drummed steady and strong, like the hoofbeats of horses running free. "I need to tell you everything," she murmured, "all of it, so you understand what we're facing. When you're ready." His arms tightened slightly. "For now, just dance with me." So she did, letting herself be held, letting herself believe in the possibility of a future where she could love without fear. The broken locket lay forgotten in the dust, its power finally broken. The telegraph arrived at sunset, carried by young Sam, who'd ridden hard from town. His face was grave as he handed the paper to Wade. "Sheriff Patterson said to deliver this immediate, sir. Said it's urgent." Wade read it twice, his expression darkening. Without a word, he passed it to her. "Richard Madison spotted Denver stop. Making inquiries about missing wife. Stop heading west. With 3 men stop. God help you both. Stop, Mary." Her hands trembled. Mary, the faithful housekeeper, still watching out for her after all this time, still risking everything to keep her safe. "It's time," she said quietly. "You need to know what you're facing." Wade nodded to Sam. "Tell Tom to double the night watch. Then get some rest." After the boy left, Wade led her to his study. The lamp cast warm shadows as she settled into the leather chair, gathering courage. He didn't rush her, just poured 2 fingers of whiskey and waited. "I was 19 when I married him," she began, "young enough to be flattered by the attention of Denver's most eligible bachelor. Rich, handsome, charming, every girl's dream." Her laugh held no humor. The dream lasted exactly 3 weeks after the wedding. She sipped the whiskey, letting it burn away old fears. The first time, it was because dinner was cold. He apologized after, bought me diamonds, swore it would. "Never happen again. I believed him. That's what they all say, isn't it? I'm sorry, I love you. I'll change." Wade's knuckles were white around his glass, but his voice stayed gentle. "How long?" 5 years. Each time worse than the last. He was careful, though. Never marked my face, never let the bruises show where his friends might see. The perfect couple, everyone said. Richard and Catherine Madison, Denver's golden pair. She stood, pacing restlessly. He started bringing business partners home, showcasing his beautiful, obedient wife. I learned to smile, to pour drinks with steady hands, to ignore the way some of them looked at me. But then, what happened? He lost a major railroad contract, came home drunk, raging. Said if I was so good at entertaining his business partners, maybe I could. She swallowed hard. That's when I knew he'd eventually kill me. If not with his fists, then with his schemes. Wade made a sound like a wounded animal. She forced herself to continue. Mary helped me plan it. She'd been with the family for decades, saw everything. We waited until he left for Chicago, then staged the fire, made sure they found a body in my room, a pauper from the morgue, wearing my nightgown, my jewelry, the burns on your arms. From before, when dinner was late, she touched the scars, absently. They helped sell the story, though. Everyone knew Catherine Madison would never be seen in public with such marks. She must have died in the fire. Wade crossed to her, his movements careful, telegraphed. Why is he still searching after all this time? Because I took something when I left, something worth more than all his railroad contracts combined. She met Wade's eyes. Evidence. Records of his real business dealings. Smuggling, extortion, murder. Enough to hang him 10 times over. The hidden compartment in your carpet bag. Yes, Mary helped me copy his private ledger, his correspondence with certain business associates. I was his wife, invisible, insignificant. He never thought I could understand what I was seeing, never thought I'd dare to use it against him. Wade's face showed a new understanding. That's why he can't let you go, not just wounded pride. He has to silence me, has to destroy the evidence before I take it to the authorities. She laughed bitterly. Though who would believe a runaway, wife over the great Richard Madison? I believe you. Wade's voice was iron and velvet, and so will Judge Harrison. He's known me since I was a boy, knows I wouldn't make accusations without proof. No. Fear made her voice sharp. I won't risk your reputation, your life. Catherine, he took her hands, scars and all. You're not alone anymore. This isn't just your fight. She looked up at him, this man who had claimed her without demands, who had given her safety without chains, who looked at her scars and saw strength instead of weakness. I'm so tired of being afraid, she whispered. Then let me be strong for both of us, just for a little while. She leaned into him, letting his arms enfold her. Outside, a coyote called to its mate across the darkening prairie. Inside, in the lamp's warm glow, she finally let herself believe in the possibility of justice, of peace, of love without fear. But Richard was coming, and this time running wasn't an option. The wanted poster appeared on the sheriff's board overnight, a crisp new sheet among the faded notices for cattle rustlers and bank robbers. Catherine's younger face stared out from the skillfully drawn portrait, her hair styled as she'd worn it in Denver, her expression demure. The name beneath read Mrs. Catherine Madison, and offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to her safe return to her loving husband. Sheriff Patterson tore it down before dawn, but not before several early risers had seen it. By breakfast, word had spread through Copper Creek like wildfire. Wade found her in the barn, brushing Dawn with mechanical strokes. Tom saw 3 strangers checking into the hotel, asking questions about recent marriages in the territory. She kept brushing, though Dawn was already gleaming. His men, not Richard himself. He'd never stay in a place like Copper Creek's hotel. He'll be at Blackwood's ranch, waiting. Likely. Wade leaned against the stall door. Patterson's on our side. Says he'll run the strangers out of town if they cause trouble. It won't be enough. Her hand stilled on Dawn's flank. Richards. Men aren't common thugs. They're professionals, hired from the same companies that break railroad strikes. They'll watch, wait, then strike when we're vulnerable. As if to confirm her words, a shot cracked across the morning air. Dawn startled, but years of training kept her from bolting. Outside, they heard Sam shouting. They found the young ranch hand standing over a dead calf, its blood staining the grass. The shot had been precise, clean, a warning, not a random act of cruelty. Found this tied to the fence. Sam handed Wade a note, his hand shaking slightly. The message was simple: evidence for safety. You have 1 day. Catherine's fingers went to her carpet bag, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her room. Alas, her proof of Richard's crimes, carefully preserved through months of running. Her only leverage, and now her greatest vulnerability. We should leave, Tom said gruffly. Get Mrs. McAllister somewhere safe until this blows over. But Wade was already shaking his head. Running's not an option, not with Blackwood trying to steal our water rights. We leave now, we'll have no ranch to come back to. Then we fight. Sam's young face was fierce. Ain't no one taking our ranch or our people. Catherine looked at them, these men who had become her family. Tom's weathered strength, Sam's youthful determination, Wade's quiet resolve. They were willing to risk everything to protect her, just as she had finally found the courage to stop running. No more running, she agreed softly, but we do this smart. Richard's men will expect fear, expect me to flee. Let's use that. Wade's eyes met hers, understanding dawning. A trap. Yes. She squared her shoulders. Richard thinks he's hunting a frightened rabbit. Time he learned he's stalking a wolf instead. They spent the day preparing. Wade sent the Wilson brothers to alert friendly neighbors, building a network of watchful eyes. Tom and Sam reinforced the barn's defenses, creating blinds and fallback positions. Catherine walked them through Richard's tactics, everything she'd learned in 5 years of surviving his rages. He'll want to make an example, she explained, spreading a map of the ranch across Wade's desk. Public humiliation before private revenge. That's his pattern. The hired men will try to take me in town, where everyone can see Richard Madison's wayward wife brought to heel. Then that's where we'll set our trap. Wade's finger traced the main street. Patterson can clear the area, give us room to maneuver. If they're focused on you, they won't see you coming. She managed a grim smile. Richard never could believe a woman capable of strategy. It's his biggest weakness. As dusk approached, Wade found her in Sarah's garden. She knelt among the late roses, their fragrance sweet in the cooling air. Having second thoughts? He asked quietly. About facing him? No. She touched a velvet petal. About risking all of you? Yes. Wade knelt beside her, heedless of his clean pants in the dirt. Catherine, he spoke her old name like a prayer. You're worth fighting for, worth dying for if it comes to that, but it won't because we're going to win. She turned to him, seeing the certainty in his eyes. This man who had given her his name, his trust, and now his heart, asking nothing in return but the chance to stand beside her. Yes, she whispered, we are. They sealed the promise with a kiss, gentle but fierce with shared purpose. Tomorrow would bring violence and fear, but tonight they had this moment of quiet courage, surrounded by Sarah's roses and the soft, settling sounds of the ranch preparing for battle. The silver-handled pistol felt cool against her palm as Wade pressed it into her hands. It was Sarah's, he said quietly. She believed a woman should be able to protect herself. Catherine checked the chambers with practiced ease, remembering lessons from her father's ranch. Before Richard had taken her away from everything she knew, the weapon was well maintained, clearly loved. Like everything in Wade's world, it had purpose and history. I won't use it unless I have to, she promised. I know, he touched her cheek. But having it might keep you from having to use it. Copper Creek's main street lay empty in the morning sun, shutters closed tight against what was coming. Sheriff Patterson had cleared the area, citing a potential disturbance. Only Martha remained in the saloon, watching through the window, with a loaded shotgun across her lap. Catherine walked alone down the dusty street, her steps unhurried. She wore Sarah's blue calico dress, her hair pinned up properly, every inch the respectable rancher's wife. The pistol rode hidden in her pocket, a secret weight against her thigh. Wade and the hands were positioned carefully, Tom in the livery. Stable Sam on the hotel roof. the Wilson brothers flanking the street in shadowed doorways, ready, waiting, invisible to eyes that would be fixed on her. Right on time, the three men emerged from the hotel. Professional muscle, dressed like businessmen, but moving like predators. She recognized their kind from Richard's dealings in Denver. "Mrs. Madison," the leader's voice carried false concern, "your husband's been terribly worried." She kept walking, steady and calm. Let them come to her, just as they'd planned. "I'm Mrs. McAllister now," she replied clearly. "And we both know Richard's only worried about what I took from his study." The men spread out, trying to flank her. She stopped in the center of the street, forcing them to approach across open ground. "Now, ma'am," the leader said smoothly, "let's not make this difficult. Mr. Madison just wants what's his. Nothing here belongs to him." Her voice rang with newfound strength. "Not the evidence, not this town, and certainly not me. Have it your way." His hand moved toward his coat. A shot cracked out. The leader's hat flew off, dust rising where Sam's bullet had clipped its brim. Everything happened at once. The men dove for cover, drawing weapons. Return fire sparked off the hotel's facade near Sam's position. Catherine rolled behind a water trough as Wade and the hands emerged from hiding, rifles raised. "Drop your weapons!" Wade's command cut through the chaos. "You're surrounded!" The leader laughed. "You're outnumbered, McAllister. Blackwood's men are on their way. Your pretty wife can't run forever." "She's not running." Another voice joined in, Sheriff Patterson stepping out of his office with a shotgun. "And neither are you. Not with arrest warrants waiting for all three of you in Denver." Catherine smiled grimly. The telegram she'd sent to Mary had borne fruit. Evidence of the hired men's past crimes rushed to sympathetic authorities. The leader's face hardened. "Kill them all. Madison will pay double." More shots exchanged. Catherine heard Sam cry out, wounded but not seriously based on his cursing. She drew Sarah's pistol, waited for her moment. It came when the leader broke cover, trying to rush her position. She rose smoothly, aim steady. "Stop," she commanded, "or I'll send you back to Richard in pieces." He saw something in her eyes. The steel that Richard had never recognized, the strength she'd found in Wade's quiet trust. His gun wavered. "It's over," she said softly. "The evidence is already on its way to a federal marshal. Richard's empire is finished." "You're lying." "Am I? He taught me well about keeping insurance, about striking where it hurts most." She smiled, and it held all the cold calculation Richard had valued in his business dealings. His mistake was teaching those lessons to a wife he thought was too weak to use them. The leader's gun lowered slowly. Behind him, his men were already surrendering to Wade and Patterson. "Richard's waiting at Blackwood's ranch," he offered, bargaining for leniency. "We know." Wade stepped up beside Catherine, his rifle still, trained steadily. "Tell him to come face his wife himself, if he's man enough." They watched Patterson lead the hired men away, their wrists bound with heavy iron. Martha emerged from the saloon with bandages for Sam's graze. Slowly, townspeople began appearing in doorways, witnessing the aftermath of Catherine's stand. "You did well," Wade murmured. She looked down at Sarah's pistol, its silver handle catching the sun. "She would have been proud, I think, to see. It used to protect her home." "Yes." Wade's free hand found hers. "But this isn't over. Richard will come now." "Good." Catherine's fingers tightened on the pistol. "Let him come. Let him see exactly who I've become." Above them, storm clouds gathered over distant mountains. But here, in this moment, she stood unafraid in the light. Wade's wife, Sarah's successor, her own woman at last, ready to face whatever came next. The package from Mary arrived 3 days after the gunfight. A small burlap sack filled with flower seeds, accompanied by a brief note. "From Sarah's garden in Denver. I saved them, hoping you'd find a place to plant roots." Catherine stood in the overgrown garden, seeds cradled in her palm. Mary must have collected them during her years as Richard's housekeeper, understanding even then that Sarah's garden held something sacred, the promise of growth, of beauty reclaimed from neglect. She was quite the gardener, Wade said, coming up beside her. His arm slipped naturally around her waist now, the gesture comfortable as a favorite coat. Had a theory about healing. Said sometimes you had to let things die back to grow stronger, like pruning roses. Catherine leaned into his warmth, or burning down a life to build a new one. The morning stretched quiet around them, broken only by the distant sounds of the hands at work. Sam's arm was healing well, worn proudly like a badge of honor. The town had rallied after the gunfight, bringing food and offers of help, finally accepting her as one of their own. "I've been thinking," Wade said carefully, "about names." She turned to face him, reading the question in his eyes. "Wade, hear me out." His hands found hers, careful of the seeds she held. "You've worn so many names. Your father's daughter, Richard's wife, the nameless woman who came to town. Even Catherine feels like someone else's life now. What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time to choose your own name. Not one given by birth or marriage or fear. One that belongs just to you." She looked down at the seeds in her palm. Potential waiting to bloom. I don't know who I am without those other names." "I do." Wade's voice held quiet certainty. "You're the woman who gentles wounded horses, who faces down gunmen to protect her home, who bakes bread and plants gardens and makes a house feel lived in again." His thumb traced her wedding ring. "You're my wife, yes, but not because I claimed because you chose to stay." Tears pricked her eyes, but they weren't the frightened tears she'd shed in Richard's house. These felt like spring rain, washing everything clean. "Hope," she whispered. "I'd like to be called Hope." Wade's smile bloomed slow and sweet as sunrise. "Hope McAllister, it suits you." They worked together in the garden, clearing weeds and turning soil. Her hands remembered the rhythm of it, muscle memory from childhood afternoons, helping her mother plant vegetables and flowers. With each seed pressed into dark earth, she felt more of Catherine Madison's shadows fall away. "Tell me about her," Wade said as they worked. "The girl you were before Richard. I want to know everything." So she did. Told him about summer storms on her father's ranch, about learning to break horses alongside her brothers, about her mother's Sunday dinners, and quiet strength. With each memory shared, the past felt less like a weight and more like a foundation, something to build upon rather than run from. As afternoon softened toward evening, they sat on the porch, watching the setting sun paint the mountains gold. Her head found its place against Wade's shoulder, their fingers intertwined. "I love you," she said simply. The words felt strange on her tongue, not because they were untrue, but because they were entirely free. No fear, no obligation, no desperate need to placate a man's anger, just the pure truth of her heart. Wade's breath caught. Then he turned, cupping her face in his calloused hands, and kissed her. Not their first kiss, but different somehow, deeper, as if they were both finally, fully present in the moment. When they parted, his eyes held a fierce tenderness. "I love you too, Hope McAllister. Have since you gentled that mare no one else could touch." They sat together as stars began to pierce the darkening sky. From the bunkhouse came the sound of Tom's fiddle, a gentle tune that spoke of home and belonging. In the garden, Mary's seeds lay waiting in fertile soil, promising new life when spring returned. But winter would come first. And with it, Richard. Madison, carrying all the cold fury of a man whose property had dared to claim its own name, its own heart, its own future. Hope squared her shoulders, feeling the weight of Sarah's pistol in her pocket, the strength of Wade's hand in hers. Let him come. She had fought too hard, planted too many seeds of her new life, to let old fears take root again. She was Hope now. And hope, once planted, grew stronger than fear. The first snow fell early that year, dusting the mountains white and turning Copper Creek's streets to mud. Hope stood at the study window, watching Wade check the horses before nightfall. The evening ritual had become precious to her, these quiet moments when the ranch settled into darkness, secure in its routines, the sound of paper crackling, in the fire drew her attention back to the desk where a document lay partially burned. She had found it hidden in her carpet-bag's secret compartment, tucked beneath Richard's incriminating ledgers. A marriage certificate with her signature forged so skillfully, even she had almost believed it real. Insurance, Richard had called it on one of his calmer days. In case you ever think of leaving, this proves you were never legally married to me, just a common thief who stole my name and property. No judge would believe you over this. The irony of it made her smile now. His own contingency plan, meant to trap her, would help set her free. A horse's whinny broke the silence, sharp, warning. Wade's head snapped up, hand moving to his gun. Through the falling snow, a single rider emerged from the gathering dark. Hope's heart stopped. She knew that posture, that way of sitting a horse as if the world itself should bow before him. Richard Madison had finally come. She reached for Sarah's pistol, but Wade was already moving to intercept. Their voices carried through the thin glass. "Mr. Madison!" Wade's tone held cold courtesy. "We've been expecting you." "McAllister." Richard's voice hadn't changed, smooth as expensive whiskey, poisonous as snake venom. "I've come for my wife." "Your wife died in a fire. The woman you're looking for is Mrs. Hope McAllister." Hope's fingers tightened on the pistol grip. Even now, Wade was protecting her right to choose her own name, her own identity. Richard's laugh held no humor. "Is that what she's calling herself? How quaint." He swung down from his horse with familiar, fluid grace. "Catherine always did. Have a flair for reinvention, but we both know what she really is. A survivor," Wade said quietly. "A woman strong enough to escape a monster. Careful, McAllister." Richard's hand drifted toward his coat. "I came here planning to be civilized, to offer you compensation for harboring my runaway wife, but if you insist on insulting me—" Hope had heard enough. She stepped out onto the porch, Sarah's pistol steady in her hand. "Hello, Richard." He turned, and for a moment she saw genuine shock break through his perfect composure. She knew what he was seeing, not the frightened woman who had fled Denver, but someone altogether different. Someone who stood straight-backed in the falling snow, wearing a rancher's wife's practical dress and an expression of calm determination. "Catherine." He recovered quickly, smile spreading like oil on water. "You're looking rustic." "Hope," she corrected. "My name is Hope now." "Your name is whatever I say it is." The mask slipped, showing the rage beneath. "Just like your life is whatever I decide to let you keep. Now, where are my papers?" "Already gone." She met his eyes steadily. "On their way to people who can't be bought or threatened. Your empire is finished, Richard." He moved so fast even Wade's warning shout came too late. Richard's gun cleared his coat, aimed not at her but at Wade. "Drop the pistol, Catherine, or your pet rancher dies first!" Hope's finger tightened on the trigger. "I won't let you hurt anyone else." "You don't have the courage." Richard's smile turned cruel. "You're still that weak little girl I married, the one who cried when I—" The shot cracked across the yard. Richard staggered, his gun falling as he clutched his shoulder. Hope kept her pistol trained on him, her hands rock steady. "That's a warning," she said softly. "The next one won't be." Wade moved smoothly to kick Richard's gun away, but the wounded man started laughing, a horrible, broken sound. "You think this changes anything?" Blood seeped between his fingers. "I own you, Catherine, always will. That's what the certificate proves. You were never really my wife, just my property." Hope drew the partially burned document from her pocket. "You mean this certificate? The forged one you planned to use against me?" She let the remains flutter to the mud at his feet. "Your insurance policy just set me free." Richard lunged for the paper, but Wade's rifle barrel pressed against his chest. In the distance, horses approached. Tom and the hands coming at the sound of gunfire. Sheriff Patterson would follow soon after. The snow fell harder now, turning Richard Madison's fine coat white, washing away the blood that stained the ground. Hope watched it cover his footprints, erasing all trace of his presents from her home, from her future. Judge Harrison's office felt too small for the gravity of the moment. Hope sat straight-backed beside Wade, watching as the judge examined the documents spread across his desk. Richard's ledgers, the forged marriage certificate, and most importantly, the new identity papers that would legally declare her Hope McAllister. Richard sat across the room, his shoulder bandaged, flanked by Patterson and a federal marshal. His perfect composure had cracked, showing the rage beneath like frost splits in fine leather. "The evidence is quite compelling," Harrison said finally, looking up from a particularly damning ledger. "Multiple counts of fraud, extortion, assault. And these business associates of yours, Mr. Madison, they've proven remarkably willing to testify once their own immunity was secured." "Lies," Richard spat. "That woman stole my private papers, forged evidence, like you forged our marriage." "Certificate?" Hope's voice remained steady. "The one you planned to use to discredit me if I ever escaped." Harrison held up the partially burned document. "Yes, quite interesting, this. Our experts confirmed it's a forgery, which means, legally speaking, you were never truly married to Mr. Madison." "She's my wife," Richard snarled. "My property? No." Wade's quiet voice cut through Richard's rage. "She belongs to herself. Always did. You just couldn't see it." Hope's hand found Wade's, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I chose my name," she said clearly. "I chose my home, and I choose to see justice done." The federal marshal stepped forward. "Richard Madison, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, criminal conspiracy, and attempted murder. You'll be transported to Denver for trial." "You can't do this." Richard's mask shattered completely. "Do you know who I am? I built Denver. I own nothing." Hope stood, facing him fully. "You own nothing now. Not your empire, not your reputation, and certainly not me." As Patterson and the marshal led Richard away, his threats echoing down the hall, Judge Harrison picked up a final document. "Now, about these identity papers. You're certain about the name?" "Yes." Hope's voice held no doubt. "Hope McAllister, the woman I chose to become." Harrison's pen scratched across the paper, making it official. "Given the circumstances, the fraudulent marriage, the documented abuse, the criminal conspiracy, the court recognizes your right to claim this identity. No one can legally contest it." He handed her the papers, still warm from the ink. Hope traced her new name, feeling the weight of its truth. "There's one more thing," Wade said quietly. He drew out another document. "A marriage license, blank, but for their names. If you're willing, we can make it proper, legal and true, like everything else should have been." Hope's vision blurred with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Yes." Harrison married them there, in his paper-strewn office, with Patterson and the marshal's deputy as witnesses. The words held different meaning now. Not a claiming, but a choosing. Not a chain, but a bond. Wade's kiss tasted of joy and triumph and endless possibility. Outside, Copper Creek's streets had turned golden in the late afternoon sun. Martha waited with the others, faces Hope had come to know as family. Tom's weathered smile, Sam's eager grin, the Wilson brothers' quiet nods. "Well?" Martha demanded. Hope held up her papers. "It's done. I'm free." "We both are." The cheer that went up startled birds from the saloon's roof. Martha hugged her hard enough to crack ribs, and even Patterson looked suspiciously misty-eyed. "Party at the saloon," Sam called. "Mrs. McAllister's buying." "That's Hope McAllister to you," she corrected gently, and saying it felt like breaking. Chains she hadn't known she still carried. But before they could celebrate, Wade touched her arm. "There's something I need to show you first." He led her to the ranch, to Sarah's garden, where Mary's seeds had begun to sprout despite the winter. Chill. There, gleaming in the sunset, stood a new headstone. Sarah McAllister, beloved wife and guardian angel, read the familiar inscription, but beneath it, freshly carved, "Her strength lives on in those who follow." "I had it added this morning," Wade said softly. "Seemed right somehow. Without her example." Hope knelt, touching the cool stone. "Thank you, Sarah." she whispered, "for showing me what a wife could be, what strength looked like wrapped in gentleness." Wade's arms encircled her from behind. "She would have been proud of you, of us." Above them, the first stars appeared in the deepening sky. Somewhere in Denver, Richard Madison sat in a cell, his power broken by the very woman he had tried to break. But here, in this garden where hope grew alongside memory, the future stretched, endless as prairie skies. Hope turned in her husband's arms, kissing him with all the fierce joy of a woman who had won not just freedom, but love. Real love, freely given and received. The kind worth fighting for, worth living for. The kind that bloomed like flowers. In winter, proving that even the darkest seasons could birth something beautiful. The wedding ring caught the morning light as Hope prepared biscuits in the kitchen. Simple gold, unadorned. Wade had offered to buy her something finer, but she'd chosen this one deliberately. Its value lay not in decoration, but in meaning, like everything else in their life together. A month had passed since Richard's arrest. The trial in Denver proceeded without her. Her sworn testimony and his own documents were evidence enough. Mary wrote weekly, keeping her informed of his downfall. Former business partners turning against him, society matrons whispering about his true nature, the carefully built facade of respectability crumbling to reveal the monster beneath. But those concerns felt distant now, like storms passing far on the horizon. Here in the ranch kitchen, surrounded by the scents of home and morning coffee, Hope had found her true place. "Something smells wonderful," Wade said, coming in from his morning rounds. He kissed her temple, casual affection that still made her heart leap. "Celebration breakfast," she reminded him. "The hands deserve it after yesterday's work." They had all pitched in to help transform the barn for the wedding party, the proper celebration their hasty legal ceremony had lacked. Martha had organized everything, declaring that Hope McAllister deserved a real wedding feast, even if it came a month late. The hands arrived as she was setting out plates, their usual roughness softened by freshly pressed shirts and awkward formality. Even Tom had tamed his wild grey hair for the occasion. "Mrs. McAllister, Hope," Sam corrected himself, grinning. "We got something for you, from all of us." The package was wrapped in brown paper and string. Inside, she found a tooled leather saddlebag. Her new name worked into the design alongside delicate roses. "Figure a rancher's wife needs proper gear," Tom said gruffly, "not just borrowed bits." Hope ran her fingers over the careful stitching, remembering her old carpet bag with its hidden compartments and desperate secrets. This was different, a thing of beauty meant to be displayed, holding nothing but honest work and open sky. "It's perfect," she whispered. The celebration grew as morning turned to afternoon. Townspeople arrived bearing food and good wishes. Martha presided over the festivities like a queen, her sharp tongue softened by obvious pride in her role as an official matchmaker. "Knew you had steel in your spine that first day," she told Hope, passing her a glass of punch. "Reminded me of Sarah, all grace on the surface but fire underneath." Sheriff Patterson arrived late, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "Got something for you," he said, pulling Hope aside. "From Denver." The telegram was brief but sweet. Richard Madison, convicted on all counts, 20 years minimum, property seized, empire dissolved, justice served. Hope passed it to Wade without comment. His arms circled her waist as he read. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "Only that I didn't find the courage sooner." She touched her wedding ring. "But then I might not have found my way here." The afternoon passed in a blur of food and music and laughter. The Wilson brothers proved surprising dancers, whirling Martha and the other ladies across the barn floor. Sam played his fiddle until his fingers ached, then surrendered it to Tom's more experienced hands. As sunset painted the mountains gold, Wade led Hope outside. They walked to Sarah's garden, where the first green shoots pushed through winter soil, Mary's seeds taking, root promising spring blooms. "I have something for you," Wade said. He drew out a small box. "Belonged to my mother, then Sarah. Now it's yours. Inside lay a ring, its gold worn smooth by generations of love. But unlike the jewelry Richard had used to mark his ownership, this felt like an offering, a choice. You don't have to wear it, Wade said quietly. The simple band means just as much. Hope studied the ring, seeing the years of careful wear that had polished it to a soft glow, like their love, not bright and showy, but enduring, tested by fire, and stronger for it. Help me put it on? Wade's hands trembled slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger above her wedding band. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. From the barn came the sound of music and happy voices, their family, not by blood but by choice, celebrating not just their marriage, but everything it represented. Second chances, healing, the courage to trust love again. Hope leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling the solid strength that had never tried to cage her, only shelter. Above them, the first stars appeared, bright as hope against the darkening sky. "Dance with me," Wade whispered. So they danced there in Sarah's garden among the promise of future flowers, not as rancher and wife, not as protector and protected, but as equals, partners, two souls who had found in each other not completion, but the freedom to be wholly themselves. And in Hope's heart bloomed the certainty that this was just the beginning of their story. Spring came early the following year, painting the ranch in wildflower colors. The photographer from Denver set up his camera in front of the house, adjusting his equipment with practiced care. "The light's perfect," he declared. "Now, Mrs. McAllister, if you'll stand beside your husband." Hope smoothed her best dress, and not silk or satin, but sturdy cotton that had seen church socials and barn dances. The ranch hands gathered around them, cleaned up but still unmistakably themselves. Tom with his wild grey hair, Sam's arm finally healed but worn in a proud sling, the Wilson brothers standing tall. "The first McAllister family portrait," Wade murmured, his hand warm at her waist. Sarah would have loved this. The garden bloomed behind them, Mary's seeds having flourished beyond hope. Roses climbed the porch rails, their fragrance mixing with fresh-cut grass and distant sage. Dawn grazed in the nearby paddock, her copper coat gleaming, while her new foal tested wobbly legs in the spring sunshine. "Everyone ready?" the photographer called. "Think about what brings you joy." Hope didn't have to think. Joy was here, in Wade's steady presence, in the family they'd built from broken pieces and shared courage, in the ranch that had offered sanctuary and become home. "Beautiful," the photographer said, capturing the moment forever. Later, after the hands had returned to work and Wade had gone to check the herds, Hope sat alone in the study. The afternoon sun slanted through windows, touching the family portrait propped on Wade's desk. She studied the faces, not just her own transformation from hunted to whole, but the happiness shining in every expression. A year ago, she had been Catherine Madison, running from shadows. Now she was Hope McAllister, standing in full sunlight. Wife, rancher, trusted friend. Free. Martha's weekly letter lay unopened beside the portrait. Inside would be news of Denver, of Richard serving his sentence, of Mary's continued watchfulness. But those concerns belonged to another life, another woman. Hope had better things to fill her days. Gardens to tend, horses to train, love to nurture and strengthen. Wade found her there at sunset, content in the quiet. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. McAllister." She smiled at the name that had once been a shield and was now simply truth, just grateful for everything. He drew her up into his arms, and they stood together watching the mountains turn purple with evening. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, Sam's fiddle sang of joy and belonging. In the garden, Sarah's roses nodded in the cooling breeze, their blooms promising beauty for generations to come. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Fences to mend, cattle to tend, a legacy to build. But tonight, in the gentle gathering dark, Hope McAllister was exactly where she belonged. Home.